Okay, this should be a relatively short one, but I just wanted to pick up on a few key points from the Ecclestone interview that I went through in the last video. Now, if you actually look at some of the things that were said, it says here in that interview, today Ecclestone takes a critical view of all of this. We had the information in time to investigate the matter. According to the statutes, however, we would probably have had to cancel the race in Singapore under these conditions. This means that it would never have taken place for the World Championship standings. Then Felipe Massa would have become world champion and not Lewis Hamilton. So this is what Ecclestone has supposedly said. This is quoted in that interview, and Ecclestone has said that in 2023 with regard to Crashgate. Now, the information that is revealed in that interview is that Ecclestone became aware after the Singapore Grand Prix, but before the Brazilian Grand Prix, the final race of that season. So during that season, after the incident had taken place, but before the end of the season, Ecclestone, the owner of the marketing rights of Formula One, or the CEO of Formula One at that stage, having sold a proportion of those marketing rights, and the FIA, the governing body of the sport, had become aware of the cheat. And rather than take the appropriate action, they covered it up. And they covered it up so that the image of Formula One wasn't damaged. Because if the image became damaged, the value, the monetary value of it would be damaged. Many of the sponsors, there might be a mass exodus saying, we no longer want to be associated with a corrupt sport and we're out. And then attracting new sponsors to the sport would be a difficult task when you've got just a dirty sport that is riddled with corruption. So they covered it up. That in itself is an illegal act. But the statement here, according to the statutes. Now, you can have a look at this. You can do this search yourself. You can just put 2008 FIA statutes. And I'm going to leave links to these documents in the description to this video. I've had a read of the FIA statutes. All they essentially are it's essentially the constitution of the FIA and the governance and the processes that they go through. Okay, and that's all they are. They don't talk about how they will deal with cheating, because they'll say essentially they're going to deal with anything like that in accordance with the FIA International Sporting Code. So you also got the 2008 sporting regulations. I'll leave a link to them because again, they'll talk about the penalties that they impose in terms of infringements during races, but they don't really talk about the generalities. Technical regulation is just about the specifications of the cars, and you can come down to the International Sporting Code. So this is the International Sporting Code. Now there might have been various updates over the course of the year, but when I go into that, which I'll click on now, and it hopefully loads up, you can see this was the one published on the 17th of November 2008. There might be other versions available, all right, but you can see chapter 11 is the penalties, and chapter 14 is enforcement. So I'm going to take you down to chapter 11 first of all, the penalties. I'm going to pause it while I scroll down. So here we are, chapter 11, penalties. Number 151, breach of rules. Any of the following offences, in addition to any offences specifically referred to previously, shall be deemed to be a breach of these rules. All bribery or attempt, directly or indirectly, to bribe any person having official duties in relation to a competition, or it's not bribery, we don't think. Any action having its objective having as its objective the entry or participation in a competition of an automobile known to be ineligible. It's not that one. C, this is the one. Any fraudulent conduct or any act prejudicial to the interests of any competition or to the interests of motorsport generally. So that's cheating. Okay, it's fraudulent because you've crashed by design. That's not organic, that's not authentic, that's a fraudulent piece of conduct where you've designed your strategy around it to benefit. So that's what the rule breach that Renault were guilty of there, 151. So that's the breach of the rules. The penalty, any breach of this code or the appendices thereto of the national rules or their appendices or of any supplementary regulations committed by any organiser, official, competitor, which is what it is, driver, or other person or organisation may be penalised or fined. So competitors, Piquet Jr. was guilty of crashing on purpose, so he's guilty of an offence. Competitor, Renault made him do it. They are guilty of offence. Alonso clearly did benefit. How much he was aware of it, he'll claim that he didn't know. However, again, I'm not going to say any more on that at the moment. Penalties or fines may be inflicted by the stewards of the meeting and the ASNs as indicated in the following articles. Now, at that event, the Singapore Grand Prix of 2008, the stewards may not have been aware that Piquet Jr. crashed on purpose. Therefore, if a driver crashes in a Formula One race, you don't, if they just crash of their own accord, you don't give them a penalty, really. For example, Nicholas Latifi at Abu Dhabi 2021, did he get a penalty for crashing? If a driver just crashes out and hits the barrier, the stewards don't really look at that as if, oh, do we give them a penalty for that? They're out of the race. They've crashed. A crash has occurred. We've got protocols that deal with a crash. And that's what they did. Now, in the aftermath, after the event has done and dusted, finished, after the stewards have disbanded, they've moved on to the next race, maybe the next one after that, it then emerges, it then becomes the role of the governing body to take the appropriate action. So this notion of punishable by the stewards, unless they were aware immediately at that race that that crash wasn't authentic and that he'd done it on purpose, then the stewards weren't the people to take the action. Okay, so you can't claim that the stewards did anything wrong that day if they weren't aware. And only they will know if they were aware. And only members of the FIA would know whether they knew. Okay, so we have to take this on face value at this stage, unless there's any evidence otherwise, unless anybody's going to come forward and state the timescale at when they knew. But on the information that's available to us, and the information that is reported by the media, we are going on the notion that the details of the crash in Singapore being done by design only emerged after that event. Okay, after that event had completed and moved on. Okay, it doesn't appear by anything that I've read so far that the awareness of that crash being done on purpose was known in Singapore. It's only afterwards, however many weeks or whatever many, I guess it's a matter of weeks afterwards where it emerged, but still within the season and still prior to the end of that season. So this here about the decision of the stewards becoming immediately binding, it's irrelevant there, okay? And the notion of appeals is essentially irrelevant there because you're not appealing to the stewards, because the stewards aren't really imposing the penalty because they're not aware of the infringement. This becomes then the realm of the FIA to deal with it. It does have scale of penalties, and these are the scale of penalties that would be applicable, afforded like to the FIA for them to be able to dish out, and they are reprimand, fines, time penalty. Obviously that's not applicable, it's after the race. Exclusion, suspension, disqualification. Now they're the kind of penalties that would apply to gross cheating. Okay, disqualification, suspension from competition. When somebody grossly cheats like that, and then also fines. Okay, so it's got that, and I'll leave a link to this within the description box. So it's got disqualification. Sentence of disqualification shall entail the permanent loss for the person disqualified of any right to take part in any capacity whatsoever in any competition. Okay, so effects of disqualification. You can read about all that there. These are the kind of penalties that should have been awarded to Piquet Jr. and to the Renault team, and perhaps to Alonso as well. Loss of awards. Suspended or disqualified during a competition will lose the right to obtain any awards assigned, and that includes stripping of awards that were illegally gained. So it's got various things that you can have a read of there. And if we come down to chapter 14, a little bit further down, it's not a lot of reading here. I've come too far, sorry. Have I missed it? There you go. Enforcement of the code, the national interpretation of rules. Each ASN holder of the sporting power shall be empowered to decide any matter raised within its territory and concerning the interpretation of this code or its national rules. So again, in Singapore, where the Grand Prix took place, they would not, by what it sounds like, have been aware that weekend that Renault had crashed on purpose to cause that. Executive authority of an ASN. Each ASN holder of the sporting power, and this word sporting power is used a lot, so there's no copping out saying, oh, it's not sport, it's entertainment, shall appoint a competitions committee and shall delegate to this committee functions and powers conferred. Okay. Again, doesn't really say any more than we already understand. And it just said interpretation of the sporting code. So there's not really a lot to add there. The point of me going through that is this notion of what Bernie's claim is that according to the statutes here, we would have probably had to cancel the race in Singapore under these conditions. And absolutely no. Absolutely no. There is no precedent for cancelling a race. The race took place. During that race, a crash occurred. You got to find out after the event, that crash wasn't authentic. However, real time, a crash occurred in the same way that in any Grand Prix a crash can happen. The FIA have to respond to that crash, which they did, in the appropriate manner by deploying the safety car. All of them competitors were subjected to the same conditions of that safety car. Some of them chose to pit and refuel and change tyres, and they all did that. None of them were particularly disadvantaged in any way that would be different to any normal Grand Prix and any normal safety car situation. And then, having returned to the track, they were able to continue competing in the same way that they normally would and challenge for World Championship points in the same way that they normally would. And that was the same conditions for all competitors. The Renault team had taken advantage of that situation by running a strategy which would maximise their benefit from that set of circumstances. They cheated, hence you disqualify them. Everybody else was competing under the same set of conditions, dealing with that same, what appeared to be, organic situation. The only reason why Felipe Massa had his chances ruined that race was a mistake by the Ferrari team in releasing Massa with the fueling rig attached, costing him loads and loads of time. And then on top of that, rightfully, the FIA gave him a penalty for the unsafe release, which it was, which cost him more time. And that caused him to psychologically not cope very well, didn't drive very well, span his car, and didn't progress through the field in the way you would have thought he should have been able to. That's the only reason why Massa didn't pick up points that race. That's the only reason, because were it not for that error by the the Ferrari team, then Massa would have been released back into the race, back into the cars that he was competing with, and most likely being able to challenge for positions in that race and World Championship points. There's no saying what would have happened. You can't predict what may have happened if it had been racing with Rosberg, with Alonso, with Hamilton and all those cars around. Anything could have happened. None of us know. But what we do know is that they messed that release up, and that cost him all that time. And were it not for that, he would have been released back into that running order, back into those positions near the front of the field, and able to compete in the same way that all the other cars were competing and picked up World Championship points. So it's not a situation where you would void a race. That is just this man, Bernie Ecclestone, wanting to do that because he's got a hatred for Lewis Hamilton and wants to then contrive this. It's also very much appears to be a court case by design. If you're taking something to court, then surely you would want to investigate the full circumstances of your case. If you are the barrister representing this guy and you're made aware, because even before it going to court, you have to submit to each other, the different parties of the case, what it is you are going to rely on in court. You have to submit your skeleton arguments. And Massa'S lawyer will have said, well, Ecclestone gave an interview in 2023 and he stated this. Well, the barrister here concerned would then have to research that interview and find out what was said, and then he'd have to realise that Bernie indeed did say according to the statutes, and then you'd have to research them statutes to see what those statutes actually said. But rather than do anything like that, David Quest KC, a UK judge, decided rather than act with any sort of integrity whatsoever, the argument that he would put forward to try and win his clients the argument is, oh, he just has forgot. He doesn't remember. That's an individual with zero integrity. And we have these people jump up in the comments section, try to claim that's the way the law works. It's just about arguing. And if you can come up with an argument that wins, then that wins. That's disgusting. We are supposed to be seeking justice. Justice is supposed to be grounded on truth and fact, not making up a bullshit argument to absolve a perpetrator from the consequence of their crime. And this is a UK judge who is trying to present a bullshit argument to absolve their client of the consequence for their crime. And this is somebody who also acts in the capacity of a judge. Zero integrity. Absolutely disgusting. And it shows you the failings of our bullshit legal system. Entirely corrupt. Entirely corrupt that it can be set up as we will determine justice depending on which argument the judge likes better, and which then version of law, which kind of legal precedent he wants to select to ground his judgment on based on the arguments that he's heard. Well, quite clearly you can just look at the facts of the situation. It's nothing to do with arguments. You can just do your research. You can find out what took place. You can see what really caused the issue for Massa in that race. You can see what the FIA's actually done. You can see these interviews where it's been reported in the media what Ecclestone has said, quoted. Now, if Ecclestone didn't say that, then there's a legal case for libel against that media for false reporting. So this 64 million claim against Ecclestone and the FIA then needs to be made against the media company for false reporting. Because if you've reported in the media something that Ecclestone didn't say, well, you've misinformed the people and you've actually given people the wrong impression of Ecclestone, haven't you? Because you've given us all the impression that Ecclestone is a fraudulent operator, withholding information and trying to cover up crime to maintain the value of the thing that he's got a financial interest in. That's the information that has been reported to us in this article, that Ecclestone is a fraud. in this article by this media source, F1 Insider. So if you've not got evidence of that interview, if you've not got anything to back that up, then there's a court case for defamation and for misrepresentation against them. They're your cases, but instead we get this guy, a UK judge, just pretending that he's forgot. Why does that keep popping out of me? Stop, just stay there and stop being a prick. Right, this guy, UK judge. And that's what he's done. Now, I just want to, before I finish this one, I just want to talk about a comment here, because we do get comments. 15 hours ago, and this is a comment from somebody who thinks this is the things, because this is what we get. We get people with limited understanding thinking that they can post something in the comment section that, oh, and that proves the point that he's trying to make. So the comment here is, and it's quoted, in addition, the ICA may admit or dismiss the appeal. So the International Court of Appeal, the FIA's International Court of Appeal, may admit or dismiss the appeal in whole or in part, and may decide to confirm, waive, or mitigate the penalty inflicted. It may also increase such a penalty unless the appeal has only been lodged by the party being subject of the appealed decision. Finally, it may annul or amend the results of a competition, considering the fundamental principle of sporting fairness and avoiding any unfair treatment of anyone, but it is not empowered to order any competition to be rerun. So this comment has been added by this commenter, because clearly from seeing their other comments that they make, it would seem to me that the point that they are seeking to project is this notion here, that the ICA, the International Court of Appeal, may annul the result of a competition, which they may. However, the bit that you're failing to understand is the full sentence. And I'll read that again. Finally, it may annul or amend the result of a competition, considering the fundamental principle of sporting fairness. So, sporting fairness. Was sporting fairness compromised in that race? Yes, it was. And how was it compromised? Well, Alonso got an artificial benefit in that race. His team planned a crash, and they planned his strategy around that planned crash, giving him an artificial benefit, which skewed sporting fairness. What about all of the other competitors? Did they have their sporting fairness compromised? Well, relative to Alonso, yes. Just like in athletics, the clean athletes have their sporting fairness compromised due to the presence of a drug cheat. Yeah? But amongst themselves, the cleanest athlete is the winner. So, here, all of the other competitors, apart from Alonso, were all subjected to the same incident being dealt with by the FIA. Incident being a crashed car. The FIA responding to that in the same way that they would respond to it. All teams being made aware of that, all teams knowing the protocols, all teams responding to those protocols accordingly. Uniform sporting fairness to all those teams. That's the way it is. Had that have just been an organic crash, had it not been manufactured, had it have taken place by another car, exactly the same scenario would have happened. The safety car would have been deployed. Teams would have chosen whether or not to take that as an opportunity to pit. Having taken that opportunity to pit, if a team makes an error, then It's an error. It hasn't been sporting fairness compromised by the event, by the actions of Renault. In terms of the sporting chances of all of the other competitors, for example, Hamilton relative to Rosberg. Prior to the Piquet Jr. crash, I believe Hamilton was running in second, I believe, in that race. Hamilton ultimately finished third. Yes, he had his race messed around with. Many drivers had their races messed around with by something that maybe wouldn't have been their pre-planned pit stop strategy, but they all respond to the incident and they all then move on their feet. That's the way that these things work in Formula One. In any race where there is a safety car deployment, teams' original strategies tend to go out the window because they try to use that opportunity to get a cheaper pit stop. And that sometimes works for them and it sometimes doesn't work for them. That's just the way it works. That hasn't compromised sporting fairness because it's the same parameters that apply to all competitors. And all you do here is amend the result by disqualifying the cheat, the car that benefited from that. And it's all about sporting fairness. Sporting fairness was still intact for every other competitor other than Alonso. So you look at another example here, and you can look at Bloodgate in rugby union, whereby a team cheated. They got one of their competitors to bite a blood capsule so that they could be substituted off for a player that otherwise would have been ineligible to return to the pitch, who was a specialist kicker, and that was trying to give them a sporting advantage by doing something illegally. Thankfully, unfortunately, it didn't pay off for them because they still lost the game. And, thankfully their cheat didn't pay off in that regard. There's still people suffered a consequence. People got banned from the sport. They got a huge fine. So you can look at that on Wikipedia. And what I also found interesting is the article on the BBC about it. And it explains what took place in Bloodgate. And what is so true is the reaction of the commentators. And if I just read this. The convenience of Williams' injury raised eyebrows and suspicions. Who punched Tom Williams in the mouth? Tom Williams, so he punched himself in the mouth, said former Bath and England fly half Stuart Barnes as he commentated on Sky Sports. You see, that's authentic commentary. That is real commentators of a sport looking at something and going, that's not right. That's bullshit. Okay, you don't get that in Formula One. You got Martin Brundle and David Croft going, oh, what's going to happen now, kids? Safety cars deployed. Anything can happen now. No, that's not how it works, Brundle and Crofty. Will they let the lap runners through? I'm not sure it's mandatory, but that's normally on a wet day where they don't. And if they do, how long? All that bullshit. All bullshit that you get in Formula One. But in rugby, you got real blokes talking about a real sport with authentic commentary. What another one? Further along the press box, Brian Moore was working for BBC Radio. See, you could learn a thing or two, Andrew Benson, you liar. Okay? What a load of rubbish. That is gamesmanship at best. Downright cheating at worst. He said on air. This is men calling out bullshit real time. But not Formula One. Not Formula One. And instead it incites the wank boy, the misinformed troll child, to jump up to validate We get the online arguing. Yeah, but I know. What about 15.3? No, they don't have to. No, he can do what he wants. All lies, all bullshit. All bullshit. So I'll leave links to all these articles. And it gives rise to the comments in the comment section where people leave a quotation, don't understand what they're talking about, but clearly believes that this here, okay, under Article 10.11.2 of the FIA judicial and disciplinary rules, mean that they can annul that race. Well, they can, but what they have to do is they have to consider the situation relative to the fundamentals principle of sporting fairness. You've got a sporting event that you oversee. You had sporting fairness compromised by the Renault cheating, artificially enhancing the chance of Alonso. So that compromised that bit of sporting fairness. You disqualify him. Was sporting fairness to everybody else involved in that event, assuming that was an authentic safety car deployment as a reaction to an authentic crash, and then everybody has the opportunity, the choice of whether to pit or not. And was anybody compromised within the opportunities to do all that and the opportunity to compete? And the answer is no. They weren't compromised in that way. Just because one team then made an error, you don't just cancel the event. All you do, your remedy to such a situation, is to disqualify the cheat. Because we go back to Bloodgate, what they didn't do here was, somebody's cheated here, so what we'll do, we'll cancel the competition. We'll cancel the competition. They didn't do that. All they do, well, they didn't need to do anything because that team was actually knocked out, but they then penalised that team. That'll do on this one. But I just felt it was important to raise that we've got a legal system where a UK judge, rather than be presented with Massa'S case, which will have had to have included the notion that Ecclestone in 2023 did an interview where he stated that according to the statutes, the race should have had to be cancelled because this is the argument that they are going on. Okay, this bit here, we'd have probably had to cancel the race. This is Massa'S lawyer that can't work out that that's not what you do. But in defence of that, rather than get that article, okay, rather than get the statutes and say, no, that's not what you do, right? His best argument in return is, he's forgot. We've got a judge, and that's his way of dealing with legal process. You see, what you should be doing as a judge is drilling down to the facts of the situation, seeing who was truly impacted in that situation due to the fraud. Okay, you're defending fraudulent conduct. You're defending Bernie Ecclestone and the FIA covering up a fraud, covering up cheating to protect the value of their assets, and you're defending that by then trying to construct an argument to defend it. There were harmed parties. You are trying to construct an argument to ensure that those harmed parties are never compensated for the damage that they actually suffered and the losses that they suffered. And you are taking on an argument to try and prevent them ever recovering anything from the losses that they incurred. That's the integrity of this man. This is our British legal system. It's not interested in justice. It's not interested in the difference between right and wrong in the context of a given situation. It's not interested in the true victims. All it cares about is people like this earning however many million for constructing an argument. And people with that level of integrity act as judges. And when they act as judges, all they do is they facilitate the game. They know that there's two people that they're now directing, just the same as this chap, that are doing exactly the same. They don't care about justice. They care about, oh, I'm going to just try and make an argument for my client that's going to net me millions. So I'll let him make his argument. I'll let him make his argument. We'll play out the facade. The lawyers will get their millions. And then we'll pretend that something here official has taken place. That's not justice. That's not integrity. And that's what these corrupt bastards do. And it's disgusting. And we're going to get the Johnny Wankrags in the comments section telling us, yes, but that's law. Ha ha. You don't understand the legal process. I don't give a fuck what you think. I'm telling you it's wrong. And that's wrong. And I don't care your opinion about it. It's wrong. And it needs to change. It's a fucked up system ran by fucked up people. Thank you for your time.